Welcome to Stillwater Chronicles. Tonight, we settle into a story about a bookshop that only appears on rainy days. There is a particular quality to rain in Cape Town. It arrives not with violence, but with intention. A slow gray dimming of the mountain, a softening of the air, the smell of wet stone rising from the pavements of the city, as though the streets themselves are exhaling. People do not hurry through Cape Town rain the way they hurry through storms in other cities. They pause. They look up. They let it happen to them. Kwame had lived in this city for 4 years. He knew the rain well. He knew, too, that on rainy days, and only on rainy days, something appeared on Veld Street. Veld Street was not remarkable. It sat in the older part of the city, the part that had been there long enough to stop apologizing for itself. Uneven cobblestones, a pharmacy on the corner with sun-bleached posters in the window, a dry cleaner, 2 shops, down with a hand-painted sign that had been peeling since before Kwame arrived. Between them, a narrow frontage, barely wide enough for a door and a window. On dry days, it was blank. Just a facade of pale stone, with no signage, no handle, nothing. As though whatever had once occupied that space had simply decided, one day, to leave no trace. Kwame had stopped noticing it eventually. The way you stop noticing the gaps in a sentence when you have read it often enough. But on rainy days, the gap filled in. The first time, he had almost walked past it. He remembered the exact quality of that rain. A fine mist more than a proper downpour. The kind that settles on your coat without you noticing until you are already damp. He had glanced sideways, as people do when the world offers something unexpected. And there it was. A shop front. Dark wood, painted a deep green that had gone almost black with age and moisture. A window full of books, old ones by the look of them, their spines turned outward in neat rows, their colors muted and warm in the gray light. A sign, hand-lettered in careful white paint, reading, Veld Street Books. He had stopped walking. He stood on the pavement in the mist and stared at the shop the way you stare at something that shouldn't be there, not with fear, not exactly, but with a kind of stillness that precedes a decision. A small brass bell hung inside the glass, visible through the window. A light burned warmly within, amber and low, casting long shadows across the shelves. He did not go in. He told himself he was in a hurry. He told himself he would come back. He walked the rest of the way home in the rain, his collar up, thinking about the bell. The second time he was ready. Or he thought he was. It was a proper rain that day, slow and steady. The kind Cape Town produces in June when the whole peninsula turns damp and close and the mountain disappears into cloud. Kwame had seen the gray sky at breakfast and thought of Veld Street and made himself a promise. He took the long route to work, past the pharmacy, past the dry cleaner, and there it was. The green paint, the amber window, the quiet arrangement of books behind glass. He went in. The bell above the door gave a single, clean note as he entered. A sound that seemed in the way of old bells, not to announce his arrival so much as acknowledge it. The shop was small, smaller than it appeared from outside, though that, Kwame thought, could simply be the shelves, which were floor to ceiling and packed densely with books, narrowing the aisles to something barely wider than his shoulders. The air smelled of paper and something warmer beneath it. Not coffee, not wood smoke. Something older. Something that reminded him of the inside of a drawer that hadn't been opened in years. He moved slowly, tilting his head to read spines. The books were familiar. Too familiar and not familiar at all. He found a copy of a novel he had read in his second year of university. A book he knew well, whose cover he could picture, whose first line he could still recite. But the author's name on the spine was wrong. Not similar. Completely different. A name he did not recognize. In a typeface that felt slightly off, as though it had been set by someone who had been told what letters looked like but had never quite learned to feel them. He pulled it from the shelf. The cover was the same. The title was the same. He opened it to the first page and read the first line. And it was the same first line he knew, the one lodged in him like a splinter of memory. But when he read on, the second line was different. Not wrong, exactly. Different in the way a reflection is different. Recognizable in shape, but reversed in small ways that accumulate unsettlingly the longer you look. He put the book back. He moved further along the shelf. He found another familiar title, another wrong author. He found a collection of poetry he had been given as a child, by a poet whose name was not the name on the spine. He found a travel memoir he had once borrowed and never finished, reauthored by a stranger. Every book he recognized, and every book was slightly wrong. There was no one in the shop. He waited for several minutes near the front, watching the rain move against the window in slow gray sheets, listening for footsteps from a back room or a stair. The amber lamp burned quietly above the counter. A small wooden stool sat behind the till. A cup of something, tea perhaps, sat beside the stool, a faint coil of steam rising from it. Though when Kwame looked at it directly, the steam seemed to stop. And when he looked away, it began again, at the edge of his vision. He left without buying anything. Outside, the rain continued. He stood on the pavement for a moment and looked back at the green window. The light within was warm and unchanged. The books in the window were perfectly still. He could see his own breath, fogging faintly in the cold air. He walked to work without looking back. He spent the next several weeks trying not to think about it. He was largely unsuccessful. He found himself, on dry mornings, walking past the gap in Veld Street and looking at the pale stone, the blank facade, the nothing that was there between the pharmacy and the dry cleaner, holding the space without occupying it. He wondered about the books. He wondered about the steam from the cup. He wondered, in the particular way that some thoughts do not leave you, about the authors' names, those wrong, familiar names, those faces. He almost recognized, in the way you almost recognize someone in a dream. He began to notice things about his own books at home. He would take a familiar book from his shelf and open it and read a passage he had underlined years ago. He would read it twice, slowly, and then he would ask himself, is this what it said? Is this exactly what it said? And he could never be entirely certain. The words were the words he remembered. But the memory felt, suddenly, like a copy of a copy, faded just slightly at the edges, approximate in ways he hadn't noticed before. He began to wonder if the bookshop's books were the wrong ones, or whether his own were. The third time it rained, he almost didn't go. He stood at his window in the morning and watched the sky come down, heavy and absolute, the kind of rain that settles in for the day and does not apologize. His tea grew cold while he stood there. He held the mug in both hands and felt the warmth leave it by degrees. He went. Veld Street was quieter than he had ever seen it. The pharmacy's lights were on, but no one moved inside. The dry cleaner's door was closed. The rain came down in long, patient curtains, and the cobblestones shone dark and deep. And between the two shops, the green frontage of Veld Street books glowed in the gray morning, like a window left open, in a house that had been locked for years. He pushed the door open. The bell gave its single note. The shop was the same. The smell was the same. Paper and age and that warmer thing beneath, like an old drawer, like time stored carefully in a small space. The amber lamp burned. The shelves rose to the ceiling. The rain moved against the window in the same slow gray sheets. But on the counter, there was a book he had not seen before. It was placed in the center of the counter, face up, as though it had been set there deliberately, as though it had been waiting. Kwame walked toward it slowly. He noticed his footsteps on the wooden floor, each one absorbed by the silence of the shop in a way that made the silence more present, not less, as though the shop was listening, as though the books on their shelves were very still, for a reason. He stopped at the counter. He looked at the book. It was a plain thing, cloth-bound, the color of dark water, a deep blue that was almost black, worn at the corners in the way of a book that has been handled often and for a long time. No illustration on the cover, no subtitle, no blurb on the back when he turned it over. Just his name on the spine, his full name in small gold letters, slightly faded. The kind of lettering that appears on very old books, careful, deliberate, pressed into cloth by someone who believed the name mattered. Kwame Asante. He did not pick it up immediately. He stood with his hands at his sides and looked at it. The rain came down outside. The amber lamp cast its circle of warmth. Somewhere from the back room, or perhaps from the walls themselves, came a sound so faint he almost dismissed it. A low, almost mechanical rhythm, like the turning of pages, like many pages, turning slowly, in sequence, each one a breath. He picked it up. It was heavier than it looked. He opened it to the first page. The text began mid-sentence, not at the beginning of a story, in the middle of one. A scene he recognized. A kitchen, yellow light, the smell of something cooking, a woman's voice in the next room. He read it once. He read it again. The words arranged themselves, not like fiction, but like memory. Specific in the way that only lived things are specific. Full of the small textures that the mind stores without meaning to. The particular angle of afternoon light through a window. The sound a spoon makes against a specific pot. The way a name sounds when spoken by someone who loves you and does not know, yet that anything is wrong. He turned the page, and the next. He read for a long time. He was not aware of reading. He was simply inside it, the way you are inside a memory when it takes you without warning. His hands held the book. The rain continued outside. The lamp burned above him. He did not notice when he reached the last page. He noticed only that the text stopped. Not at a conclusion, not at an ending, but mid-sentence again. The same way it had begun, as though the book contained only a portion of something much larger. A chapter, perhaps, or a draft, or a record of what had happened up to a certain point, left open for whatever came next. He stood at the counter for a long time after. He thought about the other books, the familiar titles with the wrong authors. He understood now, something he had not understood before, or perhaps had understood, but not wanted to look at directly. Every book in this shop was someone's story, a life rendered into text, and bound and shelved, sitting quietly in the amber light, waiting. And every one of them had the wrong author, because the author's name was the name of the person who had lived it, not the person who had written it, the person it had happened to. And here was his and unfinished. He set the book back on the counter. He looked at it for one more moment. The dark cloth cover, his name in gold, slightly faded at the edges. He thought about taking it. He thought about it for longer than he expected to. He did not take it. He left it where it was, in the center of the counter, in the amber light, among the quiet shelves and the still books, and the faint sound, if it was a sound, of pages turning somewhere in the deep interior of a shop that should not have been there. He walked to the door. The bell gave its note as he left. Outside, the rain had softened to that fine mist again, the kind that settles on your coat without you noticing. The cobblestones shone. The pharmacy stood at its corner. The dry cleaner's sign peeled in its patient way. He did not look back at the green frontage. He already knew, without looking, that when the rain stopped, when the sky cleared and the mountain reappeared and Veld Street dried in the late afternoon wind, the shop would be gone. The stone facade would return to its blankness. The gap would reassert itself between the pharmacy and the dry cleaner, holding nothing, suggesting nothing. He walked home slowly. That evening he took a book from his shelf, a favorite, one he had read 4 times and intended to read again. He sat in the yellow light of his lamp and opened it to the first page and began to read. He read carefully. At the bottom of the 3rd page, he found a sentence he was sure he did not remember. He read it again, then again. He could not decide whether it had always been there and he had simply never noticed, or whether it was new, newly arrived, quietly inserted by some process he had no name for. He read the sentence one more time. He closed the book. He placed it on the table beside him and looked at it for a long while, his hands in his lap, the lamp burning above him, the night outside his window deepening toward full dark. He thought about the book on the counter, his name in gold, the sentence that had stopped mid-thought, mid-breath, in the middle of whatever came next. He thought, "It is still raining somewhere." Thank you for listening to Stillwater Chronicles, where even the quietest streets hold the stories we haven't finished writing. If this stillness stayed with you, if the soft rain and the amber light settled somewhere deep, then let it remain a little while longer. Some books, after all, were never meant to be finished. They were only ever meant to remind you that the story is still going.